That's a crazy question to ask. It would be like saying, what if there were no Death Star in Star Wars, or no Infinity Stones in the MCU? Maybe that's precisely why this is the perfect what if to try. I'm honestly a little baffled that we haven't done this one yet, but let's forget the past and focus on the now. The tailed beasts have been the McMuffin of the story of Naruto all the way to the final confrontation of the Fourth Shinobi World War, so a lot of things will change. But we do need to question what the title "What if there were no tailed beasts" actually means. Are we just gonna say that tailed beasts as a race never existed? If so, that puts us into a precarious position, as the 10 tails is the entire reason why there is Chakra on Earth. So for this, I will insinuate that the 10 tails doesn't count to this and still existed. Everything in Naruto will play out the way it originally did, up to the point where the Sage of Six Paths split the 10 tails. That's where we'll see the beginning of our change. It'll all start by simply changing one suggestion from one character. That will see the change across the series on a grand scale. I hope you found some popcorn and a blanket, because it's time to get this rolling. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. The sage was growing old. Frankly, his time was drawing near. In a world that saw the sage as some god on earth, descended from celestial beings, even he was not immune to the passage of time. And as he felt time catching up with him, he began to wonder what would become of the world. The sage was in a position far from ordinary. As he'd been passing along his chakra to the rest of the world, it became clear that the 10 tails within him wasn't something that would die with him after his death. You see, the 10 tails was made up of nature energy, and this world was absolutely filled with nature energy. So long as nature existed, the 10 tails, the embodiment of that nature, would also exist. This meant that if Hagoromo did nothing with it, the beast would eventually reconstitute outside of his body upon death, and then once again the world would face its wrath. Of course, he had considered simply giving the beast to Ashura, but that would only kick the can down the line and leave it as a problem for the next generation. Not to say that wasn't an option. Death wasn't something someone could reschedule, and if he had no choice, he would give the beast to Ashura, because he knew that if he didn't do it, the beast would reconstitute, and the world would need to conquer it again. The issue with this was that Ashura would face it alone. In the past, Hagoromo himself and his brother had defeated the beast, and while Hagoromo saw more potential in his sons than even he himself and Hamada had, Indra had already forsaken the family and was unlikely to return. Despite his unprotested strength, Hagoromo still doubted that Ashura could defeat the 10 tails alone. What could he do? "Father, you know I don't like talking about this," Ashura said, sitting in the sage's personal office. The sage offered his child a bit of a somber smile. "I know, Ashura. I don't either, but we have to make plans, even for my own death. A lot will change when I die. I cannot bring the 10 tails to the grave with me, as that would only set it free to rampage in no less than 3 years' time. And despite your impressive strength, I don't believe you could do it alone. Not without Indra. Perhaps he would come back to us if the world is threatened. After all, he too shares this world with us. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Perhaps this is what he needs to be brought back into the fold." Hagoromo nodded. "Perhaps, but then again, are you willing to bet the lives of everyone on Earth that your brother can and will overcome his grudge? And that even if he does, the two of you can stop the beast before it ends all life on the planet?" Ashura lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Father. You're right. I should have thought this through further. These are the times where I wonder if you made the right choice naming me as your successor." Hagoromo stood and walked over to Ashura and put his hand on his shoulder. "My son, I didn't choose you because you were smarter than I or stronger than I. I chose you because your heart is full. You are led by your heart. I have no doubt that regardless of whatever your mind thinks, your heart will tell you what is right and what is wrong. In that way, you will become a sage even greater than I. That was why I chose you over Indra. To a point, I wish I had your heart. If I did, perhaps Indra would not have left. That guilt is something I'll take to the grave. Only here at the end do I understand how much of his life Indra dedicated to upholding Ninshu, and I just threw that all away. If I could do it again, I would have named you both my successors. the yin and yang that makes up my Wuji. Ashura grabbed his father's hand and pressed it to his cheek, just as he had when he was a boy. This was something that melted Hagoromo's heart. Hagoromo knew that people changed with age. Wisdom and intelligence imparted new responsibilities, and sizes changed as cells divided with time, eventually slowing their regeneration after so many years, causing the color of hair to slowly gray out as melanin died out, causing wrinkles as the cells were losing viability. Despite these things, Hagoromo had come to realize that people rarely changed. They were still as much children on the inside as they had been in the past. Sometimes that child was buried under daily stress, responsibilities, and the common knowledge and wisdom that developed with years of experience. But even though often hard to see, the child remained. The fun-loving youngster who sought days of enjoyment playing and running amok. And what restored this child, what brought it to the surface, was none other than love. The love of a parent, the love of a potential spouse. When one could let go of expectations while holding on to responsibilities, one could find that the springtime of youth never faded. Youth was not an era in one's life, nor a physical trait that passed with time. Youth was an ideal. It was a mental process. It was a way of life. And so long as one could balance youth with maturity, they could find their life eventually maximizing their enjoyment. Ashura was a master of this technique. His naive love, originating from his inner child, being upheld and protected by the strength and wisdom of his adulthood. Something Ashura himself was about to display. "Father, I have a question." "What is it, son?" Hagoromo asked. "What's the difference between creation and destruction?" Hagoromo was slightly caught off guard by this question. "Well, son, creation is to take something and give it form by building it up with something else. And destruction is to remove the form it has." "Why do you ask?" Ashura's gears were turning inside of his head, and this was visible upon his face. "So creation and destruction are the same thing. You have that one technique. What was it? 6 paths, creation, something or other?" "Creation of all things technique." Ashura nodded. "In that, you use your chakra to give form to something in reality. In doing so, though, your chakra loses form. One could say you destroy your chakra in order to create a new form in reality. So, since destruction is integral to creation with this technique, this means creation is integral to destruction as well. Could you not use the creation of all things technique to destroy the 10 tails within you, transforming it into pure nature energy? Restoring to the world which was taken away from it to create the 10 tails?" Hagoromo thought about it. "I had never thought about that before." Ashura expanded on the idea. Just divide the 10 tails' massive chakra reserve into fractions the size of a single unit of energy. That should also erase its consciousness as well, right? Hagoromo thought about it. The intricacies of erasing his consciousness would likely be more than simply that. But in truth, you bring up a good point about using the 6 paths to unmake it. Doing that should be enough to return the natural abundance of life that was slowly siphoned away. Even though it often seemed as though Hagoromo in the 10 Tails was creating something from nothing, this wasn't true. It was a technique that required chakra, and chakra, as with any energy source in the natural world, could never be created or destroyed, which meant that returning this energy to the world could have more beneficial effects. It could see lands that had once been slowly eaten away by drought, decay, and failure of crops become a lush paradise. This was perhaps the answer he'd been looking for always. And so, Hagoromo began going about diffusing the 10 Tails within him into nothing but the natural energy that had made it up. And as he did so, he eventually released it all. Upon releasing it, Hagoromo felt as if something integral to his life had been taken away, and though he had not perished when releasing the 10 Tails, this caused his condition to quickly hasten and grow worse. This result left him bedridden as his days began to draw to a close. Surrounded by his family, he was at peace. The only thing he desired was to see Indra one last time, and as it would happen, Indra himself would appear. Knowing his father's time was nigh, Indra made a final secret pilgrimage to the land of ancestors from which he had once originated to visit his ill father. Not desiring to be seen or meet with Ashura or anyone else, he came by night, entering the house when all were asleep. He made his way to his father's room where he would light a lantern. The gentle glow of orange light would slowly awaken Hagoromo, whose ringed eyes would open as he turned to look toward the source. There he saw the shadow of his son, jet black hair, a dark cloak about his shoulders. "Have you come to kill me, Indra?" The man he had once called son stood there before him, looking down. He took a deep breath and let it out as a sigh. "No, I didn't come to kill you. It looks like you'll die on your own, not too long from now anyway." Hagoromo laid there silently. Indra came a bit closer and stood above him. "You know, there was a time when I hated you with a passion, where I would have traded both eyes and my dominant arm just to see you put into a grave. And now that I'm here, watching you on your deathbed, I can't help but feel pity for you. How does it feel to know that you wasted your life developing something foolish, something that will fall by the wayside as soon as memory of you passes away?" "Ninshu will never die," Hagoromo said. Indra scoffed. "It'll die soon enough, old man. You think it'll last forever. You built your little school of thought around the goodness in people's hearts, offering them a sword and telling them to use it as a plow. The heart of mankind naturally gravitates toward war and murder. One day a war will break out, and when it does, people will forget all about Ninshu. Ninjutsu will be what they turn to, and they'll forget all about you." Hagoromo sat there silently. He wished Indra was wrong, but he knew his son had a point. "I had hoped you would have been there for Ninshu." Indra looked back. "I did too. I spent the best years of my life preparing to do so. Then I learned what you really stood for when you chose Ashura." Indra turned around. "You think this is all because I wanted power? You think this is because I wanted to rule? No, I didn't care about that. I wanted your validation. I wanted you to give me the position because I worked for it. Every day I strained my mind, my body. I pushed myself to the very limits, and in the end, the position you had promised was taken away and given to Ashura, the youngest brother, the weaker brother, the stupider brother. He did nothing to prepare for this, and I did everything to prepare. Hell, the very reason he made it through his studies at all is because I tutored him. I was holding up Ninshu. Ninshu was my life. And then I learned that Ninshu, and the creator of it that I loved and venerated so much, was just a liar. You lied to me, Father. You told me to work hard. You tried to make me strong and wise, and I pushed myself to it, to forsake what I wanted on a day-to-day basis just so I could become what you wanted. And then when I eventually became what you desired, you decided, you chose to not want me anymore. Indra, I never thought that. I wanted you always, whether you trained or not." Indra grit his teeth. He had come here cool, calm, and collected, ready to tell his father what he truly thought, but now that he was here, he couldn't help but feel rage, wrath, sorrow. He was gritting his teeth, clenching his fists. He felt tears bubbling up under his eyelids. He felt the shame as his voice began to crack with every outburst. It was here that Hagoromo realized that another emotion could pull out the child in someone. Pain, sorrow, and fear, much like love, have the ability to break through the barriers and facades people put up and free the child within. And right now, Hagoromo's heart was breaking. He didn't see the wrinkles or crow's feet of a 40-plus-year-old man. He saw his little boy, his precious little boy, crying in front of him because he felt he could never be good enough for Hagoromo. The tragedy of what Hagoromo had done to Indra was beginning to finally show itself. Hagoromo wanted to rise from his futon and hug his child, but he had no strength with which to do it. And even if he did, would Indra accept it? Ashura was always the one you loved the most. Perhaps that's why I pushed myself to my absolute limits. These eyes of mine, I did everything I could possibly do to develop them. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to look like you. I wanted you to be proud of me too. I wanted to learn all of the possible methods of learning ninjutsu. I wanted to propagate Ninshu and dedicated my very existence to making your dream come true. And all I ever wanted from you was validation. I only ever wanted you to look at me the same way you did Ashura. You think I never saw him hugging up to you, and you accepting it with joy and a smile? I wanted that. I wanted that same joy in your face when my presence was near, and you ignored it all. My efforts, every labor of love I made, every day I worked myself to the bone, tiring my mind to numbness, tiring my body to puking, just to fashion my body and mind into the thing you wanted most, so that maybe you would look at me the same way you had looked at Ashura. And when I felt I had finally done it, finally achieved what you wanted, when I felt as though I had perfectly fit into the mold of your heart's desire, you chose Ashura. I'm sorry, Indra. Shut up, Indra said as he stopped. He took a deep breath to try and control himself. Beyond the paper walls, he saw another lantern light. Someone had woken up to Indra's outburst. His Sharingan returned to Hagoromo. "It's far too late for you to apologize, father. My life is already wasted. Forfeit to you. What remains now I will use to tear down this foolish dream you've built. I'll destroy your memory and your legacy. In the days that come to pass, all will forget you ever existed. It will be as if you never existed at all." Indra turned around and blew out his lantern. He walked to the open door. "I'll destroy Ninshu. I don't care how many generations my desires must be passed down, how many times the spirit of my will must be inherited. This is my will of fire, that your will of fire be extinguished. And let my descendants forever be locked in an epic battle with the Shuras until the day one of our bloodlines is extinct. Indra, goodbye, father, now and forever." Indra then left the room, closing the door behind him, disappearing into the night. Hagoromo sat there, tears running down his cheeks. Suddenly, an elderly man walked into the room, Hagoromo's own servant. "Lord Hagoromo, are you all right?" he asked. "I heard what sounded like fighting, arguing. Are you okay?" Hagoromo nodded. "I was just having a nightmare. I'm still having it." The servant noticed smoke coming from the lantern. "Is there anything you need from me?" Hagoromo shook his head. "No, please, go back to bed. I'm okay." The servant peeked his head into the room and looked around to make sure nobody was there. "If you're sure, rest well, Lord Hagoromo." The servant closed the door and then went back to his own room. Hagoromo lay there silently for a moment. "I am living in a nightmare." The next day, Hagoromo was visited by Ashura. There he spoke with him and told him about the night before. Indra swore to pass down his will? To continually reincarnate over and over until your dream and legacy are destroyed. Hagoromo nodded. Ashura took his father's hand. "Then I swear to do the same, and to continually reincarnate over and over again for as long as I need, just to protect your dream and legacy." Hagoromo looked to his son. "Ashura, please don't be bitter with your brother, and do not hate him. My time is past, and I cannot tell you what to do, but I beg you, please, please don't destroy Indra. I cannot stand the thought of either of my sons perishing by the hand of their brother. Please, if you can reincarnate continually, then I ask, do not give up on him. His heart is shattered. He's broken, and in turn he will break others. But I still believe in the good that exists there, the kernel of innocence hidden at the center of his broken heart, the child inside of him. Please, my son, fight him not with anger or hatred, but with love. Let your victory be in mending the pieces and undoing the mistakes I've made. I chose right when I made you the next sage, but my greatest mistake was that I didn't also choose Indra. Please, though I didn't show him the love he deserved, I beg you to do so in my place. Do not forget that this is what I have taught you. Love, to love those who hate you, and to do good unto others as you would like them to do unto you." Ashura took his father's hand. "Yes, father. I will do everything in my power to bring Indra back into the fold. Rest assured, knowing this will always be my goal." He kissed his father's hand. Hagoromo looked to his son with trust in his eyes. "I leave everything I have to you and your family. I entrust you with my very will, my own will of fire. Please, forgive Indra and love him. He needs it right now, more than you know." And with that, Hagoromo passed away, his mind stuck on the things he had messed up. As his soul left his body, it uttered one last time the name of his son that he had so scorned, hoping that somewhere Indra might hear him. And indeed he did. As Indra stood outside of his hovel using wind-style ninjutsu to split the wood, he would throw it into the fire pit and set it ablaze with his fire style. As he stood there gazing down upon the flames, he felt a feeling carried along by the wind, and heard the hissing air call his name. Indra. Indra looked back into the trees, toward the swaying leaves that shook in the breeze. "The old man is dead," he said. Indra's wife looked to him and then toward the trees as well. "Does that make you happy or sad?" she asked. Indra looked back toward the fire. "Nothing changes. My will of fire goes on." And from then on, the two clans formed. From those descended of Indra, they chose the Uchiwa as their clan symbol, to reference their dedication to fanning the will of fire that made up Indra's legacy. Thus, they called themselves the Uchiha. The sons and daughters of Ashura also formed their own clan, using the Vajra as their clan symbol. this was symbolic of diamonds and thunderbolts, referencing their will that made them indestructible and their force without resistance. It symbolized their desire never to be moved from the things that Ashura believed, or their wills to force Indra and his descendants to eventually return to the fold, giving them no choice but to do so. As such, they named themselves the Senju, after the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, also known as Senju Kannon. The nicknames given to Ashura's greatest technique, the sage art would release true several thousand hands. But while the clan had thus been named, the point of what Indra had said to Hagoromo came to pass. Indra's will of fire was passed down easily, as it was simply an affirmation of the things men always desired to do. But the will of fire for Ashura, compassion, was not something natural to the human condition, and that will of fire over time became corrupted and ended up not too dissimilar from Indra's own will of fire. In the end, Indra's goals became a success. Hagoromo's will of fire had all but been put out, as the flames of war covered the entirety of the world. With compassion lost, Ninshu had lost the ideals that had created it, and now all that remained was ninjutsu, the weaponization of the life force of man. But still, the legacy of Hagoromo continued to exist for generations, and until that flame was completely burned out, the legacy of Hagoromo and Ashura respectively would continue to exist. The things neither Indra nor Ashura could explain still came to pass. While the Senju lost track of their own will of fire, it continued to burn bright within Ashura. However, while the Uchiha had not lost track of their will of fire, Indra's own began to dwindle, the flames of the grudge slowly mellowing with time to the point that Indra felt as though there was nothing of it to remain. And this is where our next generation we speak of appears, Madara and Hashirama. Two young cubs of two warring clans, who, despite their differences, would become friends in the face of the Montague-Capulet-esque feud of their families. A true Romeo and, well, Romeo situation, though the relationship was purely brotherly. The war had been hard on both sides of the family, and Madara, despite being born with the will of Indra burning hot in him, found that it was becoming harder and harder not to tire of fighting. Perhaps Indra had not thought this through when he uttered his curse upon the Senju family line. Perhaps this was just as much of a curse on the Uchiha family line as well, and only now was Indra understanding this through the fresh eyes of Madara Uchiha. Having lost all but one brother, Madara felt as though he had no more tears left to cry, felt as though his heart may never again seek joy. The tender hearts of the Uchiha were easily offended, and the emotions they felt were so violently strong that they were but sailors cast about on an uncertain sea within their own heart, lacking a rudder, taken only where the waves saw fit. And right now, Madara felt as though he'd been dropped onto a reef. The winds were blowing and the seas raged in his deepest core, but neither were enough to move him from where he was now. Frankly, he was tired of hurting. He was tired of pain. He was tired of losing the love he craved so desperately. He had hurt so much and suffered so horribly that he just didn't feel it anymore. There was nothing left of him, an empty husk where joy had once been, replaced with nothing but apathy. Or so he thought. That was until he heard something. Standing at the edge of the river, this was his favorite place to go while seeking refuge, solace after a long battle. But above the sound of water rushing by, he heard something else. Tears falling under a voice shaking and heaving in and out trembling breaths. Someone was very sad, and as the empty husk of Madara believed that never again would emotion alight within him, he felt a spark. He felt compassion, kinship. Following the sounds of the tears, he saw another boy. Enter Hashirama Senju. The eldest son of Butsuma Senju, he was the one his brothers all depended on for strength. And he was the one who had to hold a tight ship while his father was busy. Given that their father was putting all of his energy toward being a commander-in-chief, Hashirama had to fill the role of father. That meant that no matter how hard things got, Hashirama had to keep a brave smile. That was very hard to do, especially after Kawarama's passing. But the weak constitution of the ever-stressed and strained Itama found strength in the darkest of times, and so Hashirama had to put away his pain. He smiled as bright as he could, displaying strength that gave assurance to Itama. At least it did until Itama too perished. Hashirama had once again lost a brother to a war he did not understand. He hated it. And now the only one left to be strong for was Tobirama, who himself was too smart to be fooled by Hashirama's brave face. Despite that, Hashirama couldn't bear to cry in front of him. Even if Tobirama could see past it, Hashirama knew that it at least brought him comfort knowing that Hashirama was still in control. But the pain in his heart was so great, and the wounds he carried in his soul were bleeding. He was trying so hard to staunch them, but the thorns of death had struck into an artery of love, and now he felt as if he were spiritually bleeding out in front of this river. The clear, translucent blood of his spirit that humanity called tears were escaping so violently that he thought his spirit might die, dragging his body to the grave then and there. In his weakest state, that old demon that has haunted men since the day death entered the world spoke into his ear, "Why suffer? Just end it all. Go be with Itama and Kawarama. Your father won't miss you. He didn't miss your brothers. Tobirama doesn't need you. He's smart. Just walk out into the river, put your head below the waves, and take a deep breath." Hashirama looked up at the river for a moment, and deep within him, his desire to see his dead brothers was turned into a weapon against him. He almost wanted it. No, he did want it. He wanted to do it. Whatever pain of suffocation couldn't hurt worse than the pain he was feeling at this very moment. Maybe he should just... Hello? A voice sent a shiver down his spine, as if every instinct developed from every battle he had ever fought activated at once. He wanted to fight, but his body refused to move. He was still human, and regardless of instinct, his body required a signal from his brain to act. And that signal was currently being scrambled. His entire body took a screenshot and locked in until the voice spoke again. "Are you okay?" These few words saved Hashirama's life. Suddenly, the desire to cease his existence was replaced by an odd curiosity. Who was it that was speaking? Madara walked up to Hashirama and knelt down beside him. In that moment, the two brothers who had quarreled for 900 years suddenly had a moment of understanding, where it seemed that maybe their curse might end. The two boys became friends. Best friends. Brothers. Indra and Ashura once again played together, the children in their hearts freed by their love and pain, both of which they experienced in equal measure. But their ideals continued to separate them, as they both focused on which was inherent to their soul. Together they had desired to build a village where pain no longer existed and only love propagated. A place where there were no losers, only winners. But as their relationship continued, it didn't take long for it to be discovered by their fathers. Butsuma and Tobirama would appear, as would Tajima and Izuna. It was now clear. The thing they feared and dreaded, the very reason they refused to tell the other their clan names, the thing they always knew but never acknowledged now had finally reached a head. That one was a Senju, and the other an Uchiha. Their fathers and their clans would never permit the two of them to continue their friendship. The spark of joy and love Madara had once felt suddenly became a burden for him. The past few days had truly been some of the best he ever experienced. They made the pain he had been feeling tolerable to a point. The loneliness was slowly but surely being conquered. But now, reality had checked in. The thought Madara had pushed away was back, and now refused to leave until he acknowledged it. Will you lose this one too? Madara had been apathetic, but now he had known love again. He couldn't lose it. And because he couldn't lose it and couldn't keep it, he decided to throw it away of his own accord. Not because it didn't mean anything to him, but because it did. He needed to let go of his own accord because he could not survive having it stripped from him. The fact that he could choose it himself softened the blow and offered a bit of closure. The pain was still present though, and it had finally reached a boiling point. This is the moment that his eyes finally awakened as Sharingan. Not because he was determined to kill Hashirama as he had said, but because his heart couldn't bear the thought of doing so. This led to the continuation of war, to the deaths of Butsuma and Tajima, resulting in Madara and Hashirama taking the role of clan head, commanders-in-chief of the war. Hashirama continually attempted to sue for peace, while Madara, weakened and unable to trust his heart or Hashirama's actions, continued to fight, the pain of doing so, of refusing to allow himself to feel love awakening his Mangekyo Sharingan. He had told the others it was because a good friend of his died in the war, but in truth, it was because a part of himself was dying due to the refusal to acknowledge that he needed a friend. Every day when he refused to accept Hashirama's attempts at peace, it was as if his best friend were dying over and over. This pain was horrid. He needed to get rid of it, and the only way to do so was to kill Hashirama. So Madara fought his hardest to the point of blindness due to overusing his Mangekyo. And perhaps this was the fault in his actions. It was because he was almost blind that now Izuna had to defend him from Tobirama, who was more than ready to take Madara's life. This resulted in Izuna receiving a wound grievous and deep. Madara pulled away from the battlefield with his brother, shocked that such a thing could happen. It seemed that no matter what he did, he would always feel pain and sorrow. Anger and hatred followed him like crows, seeking to pick apart the remainder of his heart in this desert that threatened to kill his very soul. Lay before his brother, Izuna was steadily growing worse. His wounds became infected, and though they had tried everything they could to heal it, it wasn't enough. His wounds became gangrenous, and there was no cure. "Please, Madara, take my eyes for yourself. Continue the fight. Don't let the Uchiha die out," Izuna had said. He knew his brother's will was slowly deteriorating. "I can't do that. Your eyes are yours. You need them." "I'm dying, Madara. I'll never use them again. When I'm dead, take them for yourself." Madara shook his head. "Even if you die, I won't defile your body like that." Izuna reached out and gripped Madara's hand, knowing that Madara could not find his hand unless Izuna himself reached for it. "You can't see, Madara. You need new eyes, or you won't be able to help the Uchiha, or yourself." Madara sat there, ready to cry. Izuna gripped his hand tighter. "Think of it like this. You're not going to be defiling my body. You'll be taking my eyes so that I can see what the world has to show us in the future. Do it for me, please." Madara would agree, and when Izuna died, Madara did as told. This was how Madara awakened the eternal Mangekyou Sharingan. He went to war, his resolve all but shattered. He needed to kill Hashirama. He felt as though he would fail his people and his brother if he didn't, but the pain of losing Izuna grew too much. The war began to turn sour as Madara's ability to make sound strategic decisions began to falter. Due to this, many families within the Uchiha clan willingly surrendered to the Senju, hoping to cut their losses and end this near millennium-long war. Madara was stubborn though, but the moment Hashirama had him cornered, he asked what it would take to get Madara to agree to peace. Madara said that only death could do that. Hashirama would pull out a kunai and ready to stab himself. "Then let me end my life here and be done with it." As he stood there holding his blade, he spoke. "All those years ago, when we first met, you saved my life, Madara. Without you, I would have died. Now let me offer up that life to save yours." "No!" Madara reached out, his hand gripping Hashirama's wrist, trembling as his breath had quickened faster than when he was fighting. "No more, Hashirama. Please, no more. I can't take it anymore. I can't keep losing everything." Hashirama dropped the kunai and fell to his knees to hug Madara. "Don't worry. It'll all be okay." It was not okay. Hashirama and Madara had attempted to rebuild their clans by forming a single village, but during the course of this, once again that part of Indra showed itself once more. When Hashirama was elected as head of Konoha, the first Hokage, Madara knew for certain that this was out of pro-Senju bias. Hashirama and his Senju clan were favored. It was then that Madara realized that everyone in the village, every clan, had been allied with the Senju in the war. The Uchiha were the odd ones out. They always had been. They always would be. This was when Madara decided that enough was enough, and he attempted to get his clan to abandon the village. But alas, they refused. And so Madara was left to go it alone from that point. Madara would leave the village. And that's where the video ends for today. To whoever requested this video, sorry I don't remember exactly who it was, thank you. This story was a blast to create. I'm looking forward to continuing it from here. Did you enjoy it though? If so, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to be notified of videos like this when they drop. And while you wait for that, try one or both of the videos on screen. I bet you'll love them. Until next time, peace out.